Okay. Quickly, we're going to start again. Blend modes. How many people in this room use them and have any idea what they are? Heard of them? Yeah. Anyone else? B, what? Heard of them?
Sort of familiar, yeah.
Say what?
A little familiar?
Yeah, most people are a little bit familiar, but don't really know sort of what's going on. So I want you guys to do something with me again in Photoshop. You can close up the castle. We've done all the work we're going to do with that. It's not part of the homework. I'm going to come back into Photoshop. I want to create a synthetic file. So again, Command N or up to the File menu, New. And we're going to do an 8x10. It doesn't have to be exactly 8, but you can make it 9x10 or whatever. 300 pixels per inch and say OK to that. For me, this just makes an empty horizontal screen. And in the beginning part of this, I'm going to fill this with 50% gray. So has everybody got their blank image up? Okay, so we're going to fill this with 50% gray. The easiest way to do that is up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and in the drop-down menu for Contents, come all the way down to 50% gray. Make sure that the blending mode is normal and it's 100% opacity and say OK. And it will fill this with 50% gray. If you hover your cursor over it, you will see that we get a reading of 128, 128, 128. So we know that that's actually the exact middle gray that we were looking for. I want to put a color sampler point in the middle of this. So I am going to come over and add the little eyedropper. And again, I'm not doing the eyedropper tool, but the color sampler tool so that the point is sticky. And just click right in the middle. And we're going to put one down. And you can see that I've got 128, 128, and 128 on that. So that's our middle gray by definition. I'm going to duplicate this layer. So again, come back over to the Layers palette, hit Command J. It will actually make a copy of it. And you'll notice that again, my readout here on that same point is unchanged. It's 128, 128, 128. And the reason that is that because it's a blending mode of normal. If you look at your Layers palette, it's the blending modes right in your Layers palette that I'm actually talking about. If we click and look at the drop-down menu, you'll see that there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of blending modes in here. We don't use all of them, but we will use a few of them. So I want to make sure everybody understands what's going on here and how they work. But as long as this is set to normal, and you've got 100% opacity, and there is no transparency in here. We don't have any layer masks on this, and none of that kind of stuff on here, whatever. The top layer is dominating this whole thing. So there's no impact that's being felt from the layer that's actually underneath this. However, I'm going to change the blending mode now from normal down to multiply. And the image gets darker. But that doesn't make any sense. If you take a look at those values at the 128, 128, 128, and you multiply it times 128, 128, 128, this should be white. These numbers should have exploded. They should be way off the charts. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about? Again, I've got this layer here was all 128s. The layer underneath was all 128s as well. And the problem that we have here, and the reason I point this out to you guys, is so that you understand how this math ultimately works in here. And so again, this is the last part, hopefully, of the lecture today that you will not see on screen. It's going to be on the whiteboard, but you will be able to hear this. And hopefully I've got a darker color so you can actually see it. So, oh, here, before we do that, I want to show you one other thing really quick. I want to put down a second point. So I'm just going to click right next to this to put down a second point. And you'll see we've got two sets of readouts now, and they're both reading out in RGB, which is fine. However, on your point number 2, if you click on that little eyedropper, just like we've been doing to change either our color modes readouts, again, we're not changing the actual color of the image. We're not doing a mode change in that, but we are saying, okay, if this was converted to CMYK, what would the numbers be? If this was converted to LEB, what would the numbers be? Blah, 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 blah. But you'll notice at the very bottom here, you can go from an 8-bit readout, which is a scale of 0 to 255, to a 16-bit readout, which is a scale of 0 to 32,768 to a 32-bit readout, which is a scale of 0 to 1. And the reason that exists is that once you get to 32 bits, well, here, let me show you why really quickly. If you take a look at this slide right here, we're going to do this just in grayscale. So if we take a look in grayscale right here, this is bit depth. These are the numbers that I'm running right down here. And this is actually the number of grays that you're going to have. And so you'll come down here for an 8-bit image. We have 256 possible tones of gray. Or if we were in color, we have 16,772, blah, 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 blah. But the scale that we've been working on all along is that 0 to 255, right? 0 is black, 255 is white, 128's in the middle. That's relatively easy to come up with. But look at 16-bit. 16-bit is 65,536 tones. What's the middle of that? Who the fuck knows? You know, you got to get out a calculator and figure out what middle gray is. Nobody wants to do that. But look at this. 32-bit is 4,294,967,296 tones of gray. What's the middle of that? So the number is so big, they realize that people are going to really struggle trying to get in a 32-bit image, trying to get to, you know, well, what's the middle, or what's a quarter, or what's a, you know, what's any of that, right? So what they did is that they changed the scale. Once you reach 32-bit, instead of actually saying, okay, 0 to 4,294,000,000, instead of that, they do a scale of 0 to 1. And you can think of it like percentages, right? So if we look at our screen in Photoshop, and again, for that second point, click that little drop-down menu and come down, and you'll see that the 32-bit, the scale is 0 to 1. And if you click on this, then what you end up with, I'm going to go back to a normal blending mode on here so that we start with all the same things. And what you'll notice is that my RGB readouts is 128, 128, 128. That's in an 8-bit image. But in a 32-bit scale, it's actually 0.5. It's really 0.502, and the 02 is a rounding error that exists because you cannot get a true middle gray in an 8-bit image. An 8-bit image is an even number of tones, and the middle, exact middle, would be 127 and a half, and you cannot have a half in a binary system. So it's either got to be 127 or it's got to be 128, and Photoshop picked 128. Adobe picked 128. 127 would have been just as good, but that's why this isn't an exact 0.5. But it's extremely close, but that's why you'll see this, and these rounding errors continue to happen. Is this making sense to everybody what my scale is? Okay, so again, you won't see this on the video, but you will see this back here. This will be the deepest math we get into, and it's not that much math. Okay, don't let fractions flip you out. You can think of all of this, everything that we do today, you can think of in terms of money. Okay? So that's how I'm going to start. But I'm going to do just the typical math operators that you would do in 3rd grade. We have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And in a whole number situation, what happens when you add 2 whole numbers together? Do they get greater or lesser? They get greater, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 is a bigger number. 3 plus 2 is 5. It's a bigger number. So addition is always going to be in whole numbers greater. Subtraction, it's the opposite. In whole numbers, subtraction is always going to be less. So 6 minus 3 is 3, less number. 5 minus 1, 4, it's a less number. So it's always going to be, subtraction is always going to result in a less number, smaller number. Multiplication, 3 times 3, it's 9. 2 times 2 is 4. It's always going to be a greater value. And then division, the exact opposite. A division is always going to result in a smaller number. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. I mean, this is always going to get to be less. And that part works out great for us. However, in fractions, I'm just going to make this easier to see. So in fractions, again, if you struggle with fractions, don't think about it like numbers like that, whatever. Think about it in like dollars, right? Or parts of dollars. So a quarter plus a quarter is how much? What? A half, right? It's fit. If I have 2 quarters in my pocket, I got 50 cents in my pocket. It's a half a dollar, right? So in addition, in fractions, it's always going to be greater. In subtraction, it's the same as in whole numbers. It's always going to be less. If I've got 3 quarters minus a quarter, I end up with a half. It's a less number. If I've got a quarter minus a quarter, I got nothing. It's a less number. But when I run into multiplication, things change. So in multiplication, what happens is, if I do a quarter times a quarter, it equals 1/8. Again, I take that back. It equals 1/16. A quarter of a quarter. So the quarter is 25 cents, and you divide that by 4. It's around. You get where this is all going, right? So multiplication of fractions results in a lesser number. The number decreases. Does that make sense? So again, what's half of a half? 50 cents, what's half of that? 25. It's less, right? So half of a half is a quarter. So let's just not do quarters up here. Let's do halves. It's easier to think about it with, again, money. So 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4, because that's exactly the thing that we're going to see up here. Does that make sense, everyone? The flip side holds true, though, for division as well. Anything divided by 1 is itself, right? So if I have a quarter divided by 1, it actually is a quarter. So it's actually increases here, so it's greater. So you can see in addition and subtraction, everything is the same in both worlds. But in multiplication and division, these two flip, and the way the math works for fractions, is the exact opposite of how it works for whole numbers. And so that's how this is going to play out for us. So remember when we said here that I've got both of these are basically at halves. I'm going to pay attention to this number right here, not the 128. But when we changed the blending mode from normal down to multiply, my question to you was, why does this not go white? Why is this, if I had 128, or just 128 times 128, it'd be up in the thousands. It would be blown out to white. But all blend mode math is done using this 32-bit system. And the 32-bit system is a scale of 0 to 1. So both of these are 0.5. 0.5 multiplied times 0.5, half of a half, ends up being a quarter. And the image gets darker instead of lighter. And look at the readout. You get it right here. The math doesn't lie. 0.5 times 0.5 equals 0.25, which is darker. Remember, 0 is black, 1 is white. Does this make sense to everyone? That's why these names can be a little misleading if you don't really sort of get what's going on. Yes?
Is it done in 32 just like his blending mode is done in 32 just to make sure it gets all the like colors in that, so no matter what I do?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly true. So there are other blend modes that we can look at really quickly that do make sense. So for instance, I'm going to, instead of start with multiply, go all the way down to add. It'll be linear dodge add. And this makes sense. Again, the addition and the subtraction part are the same as they are regardless of the system that we're doing. We now have got a 255. Again, we added a middle gray plus a middle gray, and our blending mode, the result, what we see here is the result of the blending mode and these two layers. These two layers have a name. The one on the bottom is called the base layer. The one on the top is called the blend layer. And again, what blending modes do is they look at those two values and they run some kind of math on the two of them. So you can see right now when I said add, what it's basically doing is it's looking at the blend layer and the base layer and it's adding them together, and then what I see is the result of that. Now if you look at the layer, you can tell that it's still both middle grays here, but what I see, the consequence of this, is a pure white because I've added these two things together. Make sense? There's a subtract blend mode as well. If you click on that and you can go down to it, it's sort of more towards the bottom. I end up with black, which is exactly what you would expect. I've got a 50% gray, I'm subtracting 50% from it, whatever, I end up with black. So those are pretty obvious. We've already talked about the multiply and why that actually makes things darker. So that part should be somewhat self-evident. Last thing we're going to do here, and then we're actually going to move on from this. I want everybody to look up at this screen right here. If you click on your drop down for your blend modes, what you will see is that they are actually divided into sections. The first section is the darkening section, and it's darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, darker color. The second group is the lightening section, and what really this is that the lightening group, you'll see it's a 1-for-1 against the darkening group. The lighten blend mode is the exact opposite of darken. The screen blend mode is the exact opposite of multiply. The color dodge, exactly opposite color burn. And they go all the way down through that. So all of these are simply the opposites of the darken group. Make sense? The next group down that starts with overlay is the contrast group. And what the contrast group is, it's a mix of the lightening group and the darkening group. So if you say, I'm going to use an overlay blend mode, what happens is that anything that's darker than middle gray gets darkened. Anything that's lighter than middle gray gets lightened. If I go to soft light, anything that's darker than middle gray is multiplied. Anything that's lighter than middle gray is screened. Is this making sense, everybody, what's going on? So really quickly, to see how some of this ends up affecting, throw away that top layer. On our bottom layer, I want to pull a gradient. So hit the G key to get the gradient tool. Hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. Up at the top, you will see in your options palette, because we got the gradient tool, click on the drop-down menu for the type of gradient. It'll open up. You've got selections in here that you can use. Open up the basic group of this and select the very first one. That is foreground color to background color. You'll also notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of gradients that we can have. We're not going to explore these in depth right now, but we will certainly later on, because we use these to build shadows. I want you to select the first one. It's a linear gradient, and all this is now going to go from our foreground color to our background color. Come down onto your screen, onto your image, get your cursor as close to the left-hand side as you can. Click, drag to the right-hand side, hold down the Shift key, because that will restrain it to a perfect horizontal line, and let go, and you should have a gradient going from black to white sitting on your image right here. I want to add a layer on top of that. So I just added a blank layer by clicking on the little plus inside the box at the bottom of the layers palette. And come up, and again, I'm going to fill this with 50% gray. So we're going to do 50% fill, 50% gray, and say OK to that. Now in this case, again, my blending mode is set to normal, and the reason that I don't see any interaction between the two is, by definition, normal is no blending action between the two. Again, if I reduce the opacity, there would be interaction. If I put a layer mask on, there would be interaction. But as it is right now, there's nothing that changes. All you see is that 50% gray. However, if I change, yes? I'm sorry, what? It sure is. And oh, that's interesting. You know, the thing that sucks about that is when you want that to happen, you will never be able to make this happen again. Yeah, it's only because your foreground and background colors look like, well, those are defaulted. Let's just hit Command Z to undo it. Okay, and so hit the G key, and then click and drag across, and let go. And now add a new blank layer on top of that. Oh no, and go up to the image menu, edit menu. Edit, fill. Yep, and oh, yeah, don't fill with foreground color. Click on the drop-down menu, do 50% gray, and say OK. You're good. But see what I mean? If you like, oh God, that was the best thing I've ever done in Photoshop, can't reproduce it. So I want everybody then to do multiply. So we'll click on the drop-down menu and come down to multiply, and you can see that it actually makes what we're looking at darker. This is now an interaction between the two layers. So they are running math between these two. They're multiplying that 50% times what's going on underneath it. And so you can see if we come up here to the very front part that's like up here, well, you'll just see this is an interaction based on the two. And so what we're seeing now, the result that we get is the mathematical interaction between these two layers. It makes everything darker. If we change this down to screen, you can see that it makes everything lighter. Now this is not a pure white here, but this 50% is actually screening back, and it's lifting up the blacks, and the whites are actually, the white side over here is almost gone completely white. If we again click on our blending mode and drop it down, and let's do overlay, you get pretty much the effect that we were actually looking at earlier here. It doesn't look very much changed. If you turn this on and off, you'll see that the gradient doesn't change at all. Again, in the overlay group, 50% gray has no impact on the image at all. So if we go down to soft light, it isn't going to impact the image either at all, because again, a lot of the dodging and burn layers that we do, we actually fill them with 50% gray. They have no impact on the image. So finally, we're going to go down to the subtract. So this is what will happen in the subtract. Or we can go to the add. linear dodge. So this is all that I'm trying to get across to you guys, is that what blend modes do is they look at both layers and they combine them mathematically, and what you see is that combination. The ones that I want you to focus on in this class specifically are normal, because that's what we primarily work in. Multiply, screen, those are quick ways to darken and lighten an image. And then overlay and soft light. And then all, again, spill removal, those kind of things, color, hue, saturation, all at the very end. Questions about any of this? Okay. You can close this guy up. What's the best selection tool in Photoshop? We have quick selection tool, vote here. Anyone else? So this is the part where you're going to learn to hate me really quickly and then love me quickly after that, I hope. Yes? The pen tool. It is. Do you use the pen tool a lot? Right, does anybody in this room use the pen tool a lot, right? How many people in this room have tried the pen tool and immediately hated it? Oh, right, it's like it takes off on you and it's just like, fuck, I can't get this to, right? I mean, that happens to everyone, right? Okay, so number one, I'm going to agree that the pen tool is hands down, no question about it, the best selection tool that there is in Photoshop. But number two, I'm going to actually show you how to use it in a really simple way. You're going to become the master of the pen tool before you get out of here today. That sounds pretty good, right? The thing is that when you need it, there's nothing else. When you don't need it, anyway. How many of you, though, do this? Quick selection tool, and then you go in, it makes a mask, and you go in with a paintbrush and you start to refine. And you paint a little bit in, and then you have to paint a little bit out. And then you paint a little bit in, you have to paint a little bit out. And then you paint a little bit in, and this just keeps going on and on and on. And 2 hours later, you still don't have the mask you want. Right? 10 minutes of the pen tool, you would have been there and you would have gone on. But, you know, you're still fucking around with that because that's how everybody learns. Everybody learns to do all this shit with a brush or a lasso tool or that kind of stuff. It is not the way to do this stuff. So I'm going to show you, we're going to work on an image that you probably won't believe would actually work. But first off, I need to show you how to use the pen tool, and that's where we're going to start. Again, curse me now, but you will love me later, I hope. All right. So if we go to our session, is this really session 4? Oh my God. Session 4 files. Inside of there is a TIFF called Viacom_path. If you can just double click that and open that up into Photoshop. If you get this warning, that's a good sign. It just says that there's a different color profile, or there's no, it doesn't have one, which is fine, we don't need it. But again, those warning signs, the fact that you're seeing those, that's actually a very encouraging thing. So I'm gonna double click on the hand in the tool palette just to get this thing as big as I can get it. I do not want to see the guidelines that are on here, so I have two options. The first one is simply hit Command H, it will hide them, but Command H will hide all extras. So for instance, if I have a selection going, it will also hide the selection. So Command H will bring those things back. If it's the very first time you hit Command H in Photoshop, a warning dialog box will open up and say, do you want to hide Photoshop or do you want to hide extras? You make sure you want to click on hide extras, because that's what things like the marching ants, selections, the guidelines, those are all the extras, whatever. And again, if they're in your way, you want to hide those. Hiding Photoshop is too easy to do with just a mouse click, so nobody actually uses that part. So at any rate, I'm going to just get rid of these guides. Come up to the View menu and come down to Guides and come over to Clear Guides, and you will get rid of them. So I'm going to zoom in to the V. That's where we're going to actually start. And I'm going to go over to my Layers palette, and I'm going to select the pen tool. It's supposed to look like a pen nib. It's right above the T, which is the text tool. Text, when you use text in Photoshop, when you type text in, all of the text that you type in are all made up of paths. So the pen tool creates a path. Anyway. Is everybody sort of square on that part? The keyboard shortcut for it is the P key, which stands for the pen tool. So I want you just to select the pen tool. And when you do that, again, your eyes should jump up to the very top and take a look at the options palette that are on the top. Couple of things that we need to set up here that are important to us. The first is this drop-down menu part where it says path. You want to make sure that it says path and not shape. If it says shape, you're on the wrong one. You've got to change it to path. Then as we go over, I'm going to skip over all of these things until I get to the little gear wheel. Click on that, and in the little gear wheel, you'll get a drop-down menu that says path options, and you want to make sure that you click on this rubber band. I'll show you what the rubber band does in just a second, but you also have, does everybody have a thickness and a color option? In the old days, you didn't have either one of those. You now have that control. This 1 pixel thickness is fine for us, and the blue is also fine for us because we will be able to see this. But if you were working on a blue image right now, you would not want your path to be blue because you'd never be able to see it. So you can click on this drop-down default, and you can change your path to any of these options. It won't change your path at all. It won't change what the tool is actually doing. It's just your ability to see it. So I'm going to leave it at its default blue. And to get rid of that box without, again, dropping down a point, click up by the name that says Adobe at the top. That thing will fly back up. And then finally, you want to check mark in the auto add and auto delete parts. Now, what I'm showing you, if you take a look at, again, in your folder for week number 4, there is a pen tool and path PDF that is going to walk you through all the same shit that we just went through. You'll notice that the illustrations here, though, do not include anything. They don't include thickness or color, but the real key to this is you want that rubber band enabled. So this will actually get you through all of the stuff that we're going to do about this today. So back in here, so I'm going to come up again. This is another advantage we have in your preferences when you set this up to have the specific exact cursors. You don't have a little pin that's sitting out here. Has everybody got a crosshair? Anybody not? So if you don't, you need to go to Photoshop, to Preferences, down to Cursors. And in the cursors that come up, the other cursors you need to select as Precise, not Standard. And say OK. And now you should have crosshair. Did that work for everyone? Okay. So at its simplest, the way the tool works is this. Oh, before we get to it, click on your drop-down menu of the pen tool. You need to make sure that the very top one is selected. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different possible pen tools. You're never going to use any but the very top one. The other 5 are dead to you. See how easy I'm making this? I know, right? Instead of having to learn 6 tools, you only need to learn 1. It'll do everything you want it to do. I know, right? Okay, so make sure the top one's selected. You never have to visit this again. Okay, so the way the tool works, we're going to start up at the very intersection of the top of the V, and I like to zoom in pretty tight on this. A lot of times I also like to hit the F key for this first. What the F key does is it takes us to the pasteboard. And let me show you why really quick before you do it. We've got the pen tool selected, but if I come over and I get really close to the rulers that are on the side, as I'm beginning to go outside of my image, my pen tool changes back to the normal cursor that you have in every Macintosh program. It's no longer the tool. Sometimes you need to use this tool outside the boundaries of your image. If you hit the F key once, it takes you to what they call the pasteboard. If you hold down your spacebar now, you get the hand. You can actually come to the side of this, and you'll see this is the edge of my image. I've got the pen tool selected right here, but if I drag the pen tool completely outside of my image, it still stays as the pen tool. I can actually put a point out here if I need to, out into the pasteboard. So it's just an easier way a lot of times to work. And so a lot of times we're going to go to the pasteboard. To get out of the pasteboard, because right now you don't have those little traffic light things up at the top. You can't close this file. To get back to your normal space, hit the F key again. It takes you to the black pasteboard which basically gets rid of all of your tools. And then the F key one last time gets you back to the image the way we always know to work with an image, the little stoplights that are up at the very top that let you open, close, or dock the image or whatever. So again, I'm going to hit the F key once. I've got one hand that's always on the space bar. My left thumb is always on the space bar because I use the hand to move around. Once we start using the tool, if you hold down the space bar, you will actually get the hand, even though you don't have to select the hand. It only does it temporarily so that when you let go, you go right back to the pen tool and it picks up right where you left off. What else was I going to tell you about this? No idea. We'll get there. All right, so anyway, I'm going to start up at the very top right-hand corner, and I'm going to click once in that very top corner, and it puts down a point, and then you see as I start to pull my cursor away, I'm not dragging now. Just click. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Do not try to do this with a tablet. You do not ever want to do pen work with a tablet, and the reason that you don't is, here, look up at me. This is going to be sort of my tablet right here. So here's my tablet right here. And I'm going to hover my cursor over the place where I want to put that point. But when I actually drop my stylus down onto the tablet, it will move off that point by a fraction, by a mere fraction, whatever. But still, it's frustrating as hell. So then you have to undo it and you do it again, whatever. Your best bet, with hands down, if you do a lot of path work, buy a mouse. Because you can hover right over the point that you want to hit, you push the mouse button, and it is precise and it's exact, and your life will be so much better. Doing it with a trackpad is somewhere in between the two. Okay, so I've got that point. See this line that's coming off of it? That's the rubber band. If I turn off the rubber band, I don't have that point anymore. That point actually is going to help me line up my path tool along this edge. So that's why you actually have that guy on. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom of the V, and I'm going to just click again. Again, I'm not clicking and dragging. I'm just clicking. Now I'm moving the pen tool up to the top corner, and I'm going to click, and I need you guys to start outlining the V. And when I get back to my original point and hover over it, you'll notice that my cursor changes to this little symbol, and it looks like a pen tool nib with a little circle next to it. That's telling me that it's going to complete the path. And I simply click on it, and I'm good to go. So then I hold down the space bar. I temporarily get the hand, and I can drag my image over to get the eye more in the middle of my image, and I'm ready to go for the eye. But before we do that, I want you to click on the tab for your path. So again, it's right next to the Layers tab. If you click on it, you can actually see that there is a work path that's now been established, and you can see the outline of the letter V on mine. So if you've completed your letter V, you'll actually see that guy as well. Did this work for everyone? The problem with work paths is that they are temporary. And to show you what I mean by that, I want you to click right. You can see that the work path is highlighted right now. If you click under, and the blue path is actually also visible. If you click right underneath it, it's no longer selected, and the path is no longer visible either. If you go back up and click on the work path, you'll see you get to see the blue path again on there, and it's actually highlighted. However, I want you to click outside of it. I want you to click underneath it, and then put in your eye. So I'm just going to start in the top left-hand corner of my eye, and I click once, and look what happened to my work path. Work paths are temporary, and as long as we're working on it, as long as it's staying active, we can get a lot of stuff on it. We can do multiple letters and that kind of stuff. But the minute you deselect a work path, it's a temporary holding space for your path. You lose your path. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. It brings the V back in here. I'm going to select the work path to make it active, and now I can actually start to add my V. And instead of creating a brand new work path for me, it's just going to allow me to continue on with the one that I actually had. So if you guys will go ahead and finish that, that would be great. I'm also going to do the A. And look what happens. Everybody look at my screen really quickly right here. I can't get to the other place where I want to put my points. So again, hold down the space bar, you temporarily get the hand, you can slide your image over, let go of the space bar, and your pen tool is not affected at all, and you can finish this guy up. And you'll notice that you're getting the whole VIA that's actually in the work path. Now, that part works great, but the problem is that if we were to save our file right now, close it up and open it up again, work path is temporary, this would be gone. So we need to save our work path. There's two ways of doing it. There's a flyout menu to the right of the tab that says path. You can click on that and say, I want to save this path, and a window will open up and it'll offer you to call it path 1. I'm going to just call it VIA and say OK to that. And now this will actually be saved. Now I don't worry about that temporary part. And to show you what I mean by that is that if we click again outside the VIA, I'm going to come over here to start the C. I'm going to click on the bottom corner. Just take a look at my screen where I'm actually talking about right here. I'm clicking on where the curve of the inside actually meets the sort of the straight line of the top. That's where I'm going to start. And if I click here, you'll see it's established a work path for me now, but I'd never have lost the VIA. So it's a way of, again, this is going to temporarily hold the information that I'm doing, but I can do a lot of things with that. I can put them all together. So anyway, I'm going to start as a separate work path. We good on this part so far? Yes. So this is what I did. Let me go back in time to undo that part. So I had the VIA, everything is on that path. I'm going to select underneath it so it's no longer active. So the next path that I draw is not going to be on this top one because it was not selected when I did it. So, but it's going to start a new temporary path for me called work path. And so you see it comes in right there. And as I start to come up here now and click on the top part, it's going to start drawing that line in this work path. Are we good on this part? Okay, so here's the trick about how you get this tool to work without driving yourself absolutely nuts. And I've used this tool forever, so just trust me on this one. A little bit of time today, you'll become a pro at this, and it'll change your life. So don't do this yet. Watch my screen, and then I'm going to let you guys go, and I'm going to come around the room and help whoever is struggling with this. So there are people who would look at this arc right here and actually be able to draw the entire thing using a single point. I'm not that person. And it takes so much time to perfect it that it's not worth it. So you want to chop your paths up into like reasonable amounts. So if we consider this thing as a clock face, this would be going from noon all the way back to 6 o'clock. I'm just going to use that to describe things. I'm going to pick a point somewhere around 10 o'clock. So, and here is the trick. So again, we're going to go through this, so please just watch my screen. Don't do this yet, and then I'm going to undo it and we'll do it again. So this is how it works. You find a point that's reasonable. Again, don't get greedy with your points. Reasonable. You click, you hold your mouse down, and you drag in the direction that your path is going to move. So you see, I'm dragging in the direction that I want my path to go. I am not going back to the original part. I am dragging in the direction that I want it to go. The longer the control line that I get, the more it impacts the beginning of the point. So the point that's sitting up at the very top, it's having a greater impact because this is so long. If I keep my point really short, it actually has a much greater impact right next to the point that I'm working on right now. Your job is to simply pull this out and get it to line up like I just did and perfectly describe that arc and let go. And here's the secret. Go back to the center. I'm not dragging. I'm simply going back to the center and I'm hovering over the center point. Hold down the Option key and click once. You get rid of that control handle that was describing that arc. So I don't now need to worry about having a handle that is going to fuck that up or fuck the next part up either. So keep watching, one more second. This also gives me the chance, it's pretty much like starting over again, starting brand new. I'm going to come down to around the 8 o'clock point. I'm going to click and drag in the direction of my path. And again, I'm just trying to get it using the length and the spin, all of those parts to get it to describe that arc. I'm going to let go, come back, hover over the center part, hold down the Option key, click, and get rid of that point. Finally, I'm going to come down to the bottom, click, drag, get it to describe that arc, come back to the center, hold down the Option key, click. Now look what happens. I have a point with no handles going forward. So I can start just that same click process that we did when we built the V and the I and the A. All right, so I need you guys to outline the C. And if something's not working, shout out and I'll come by. Is this working for everyone? If you know what you're doing, it is. If you don't, you're going to get into deep trouble later on. How did you do the point right here on the bottom? You had to get rid of that line, that other handle.
Well, after I'm done with it, it stops it. Like I do it once.
No, here, I'm going to come over and see what you're talking about.
Okay. And then it goes back to normal.
Yeah, that's all fine. But what happens when you get up to here? Go ahead and finish it.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I did it before.
Is this working for you guys? Yes? Okay, we're going to do the 0 next. And the 0, you need to think about this. This is kind of an important one. With doing pin work, especially stuff where you've got paths that are nested inside of other paths, you always want to work from the outside in. You do not want to work from the inside out. That will confuse Photoshop in its order. So to do the 0 that's next, or the O, do the outside first, and it's again the same trip that we just did. And once you get the first one done, the outside done, then do the inside. And hold off on doing the M for just a second. Yes? How do you save the path? You go to the little drop-out menu on the side and come out onto Save Path. Or double-click on Work Path and you'll get the same Save dialog box. And in this case, I'm going to call it CO. Okay, so a couple of things about it. Is everybody sort of good? Did we get through the O?
We're almost done.
Okay, all right, no, I'll wait. Yeah.
What do I do when I get to the end of the C, but then you're like on the last point? So how would I like finish like this part?
Go ahead and land on it, click and drag.
Oh, you could do that.
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
last
yeah,
one.
yeah. And so just finish that guy out. You need to go that direction.
This one?
Yeah, there you go.
I wasn't sure if it was gonna like snap it right away.
Uh-uh.
Okay.
How do I fix my points if I can't see them anymore?
If you can't see them, we'll get to that. Hold that thought for just a second. I need to make sure everybody got through the O. Yes. Okay, so again, hit Command Z to undo that. Or yeah. So this is a great thing that's happening right now. If you make a mistake in this is another trick about how to avoid all of those other pen tools and all that other kind of stuff, whatever. Do not try to, if you make a mistake, do not try to fix it. Go back in history and undo it and start over. If you get into that hole, okay, I'm going to go in and change the points and make that a corner point and another point, whatever, you're right back into the tangle nightmare of all those 6 pen tools. If you make a mistake, stop at that point, go back, undo it, start again, and get it right the next time. Okay, so you got this part is actually fine. So come over here, about here, click, and you clicked once. You need to keep your finger down on it. So hit Command Z to undo it. Command Z, or just go back in space, in history. Okay, come over a little far, right under the point. That's a little aggressive. Come up a little higher. Click and drag. Hold down your mouse and drag.
Okay.
And keep dragging in the direction that this is going, and then play with it. So you've got a little too much there, drag a little further out. That's it, good, perfect, and you're right there. Let go. Hover now over the center point. Oh, and hold on the Option key and click. It gets rid of the second line, and then just do it all over again.
Okay. Thank you.
Here, I'll wait.
So, wait, do I click
No,
or
don't. You're not clicking here again. Next point,
Oh,
down
okay.
here. Click and drag in the direction that the pen tool is going. Yep. You're getting it. Drag down a little further. Right there. Close. Ooh, pretty damn close. Good. Let go, come back up. You'll get the practice, don't worry. Hold down the Option key and click. Perfect, get right at the second point. And you can go for broke, go for the corner. Click and drag. Yep. Perfect, close enough. You can get a lot more precise in the homework.
Okay.
Hold down the Option key, click. And then come up and it's a single point, click. There's no dragging. And then your center part, click and drag. All right, is everybody else okay? Are we good? Okay, so a couple things about this. Paths are copy and pastable. So I have got my CO is actually selected. You can see it's the active work path right here. I've got the points, the little points that are that made up my last path are actually still showing on the middle of the O. This part doesn't really matter what I'm going to do next. It just matters that you've actually got the path, the work path is actually selected and active. You can copy and paste paths, which is what we're going to do. I'm going to come up to the Edit menu, and I'm going to come down and do Copy. And then I'm going to click on the VIA and go up to the Edit menu and come down and do Paste. And it actually only put in the one that was selected, the one path that was selected. So it only put in the little one that was in the middle that had the points showing. I'm going to undo that, Command Z to undo that. I'm going to go back to the work path. I need to select these paths in order to copy and paste them. None of them are selected right now. You'll see you don't see any of those little dots that represent any of that. So that is controlled by these arrows. So if again you come over to your your tools palette, underneath the T, right on the opposite side of the T from the pen tool, there's a little arrow. Yours could be either white or black. If you click on the drop-down menu, you will see that you can do the black one, which is the path selection tool, or you can do the white one, which is the direct selection tool. I want to start with the black one, the path selection tool. And if you pick that and then come over to your image, again, make sure your work path is active. You can see that it's highlighted. And simply click on the C, it will actually select it. And you can see the little points on the C right now. If you come over and click on the outside ring of the O, you will notice that the C is no longer selected, but the inside of the O is the outside of the O is selected. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the C, they are both selected. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the center part, it's also selected. If you hold down the Option key and click on the C, it will do nothing. So again, to undo them all, simply click outside of them all, and now nothing is selected. Or we can click again, hold down the Shift key, and click to keep adding them. 1 second, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo, or just click on the outside to undo all of that. You can also use this tool to click and drag. So if we start at the very top, click and drag across all 3 paths, all 3 are selected. Yes?
So I outlined everything.
Yep.
But I think I outlined everything on the first path that I made. So how do I, does that make sense?
Show me your path.
So I goofed, and so I clicked the VIA path, and
Yeah.
just put it all under.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're all right, don't worry. So, because I'm going to get mine to look like yours right now. All right. So now I've got the C, the O, both of the paths that are making up the O. I'm going to copy these. Again, Edit menu, copy. Come over to my VIA, to the top one, and do paste. And now I've got all the paths that are on the exact same one. So they're all together now. It's got the VIA-CO all in one. Did that make sense to what we just did? I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to select the work path again. I've still got that black-headed arrow. I'm going to click and drag across these things, and now I'm going to cut them. Instead of making a copy, I'm going to cut them up to the Edit menu, down to Cut. You'll notice that the work path now is gone, and select the VIA, and again, paste that, and it puts them all in on one. So you can copy and paste things. We can duplicate things as well. So if you click on your VIA, you can actually drag it down to the little icon at the bottom that's the square with the plus in the middle of it, and you can make a copy of it, and it'll name itself, and this is now 2 sets of those paths. You can throw paths away, so we can grab the copy that I just made and drag it to the trash and get rid of it. All of these things we can actually ultimately do in this. So Mac, to your point, how do you fix stuff that you've screwed up? So I'm going to come over here to the eye. So everybody look up at my screen really quickly. You can see what I'm actually talking about here. So I screwed up the corner of this eye. You can sort of see it didn't trace it completely. The point is a little bit low. So if I use this black-headed arrow to actually do this, and I click on the eye, I can then move this. I'm going to click right here in the middle, and I can move it, but you will see it moves the entire path. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to zoom all the way out, and I'm going to select all of my paths. So I'm going to click and drag across everybody, and then I can move everybody, and then I can move everybody as all in one. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I could select again a single path and move just it. I'm going to undo that. But the trick is you don't want to move shit, you want to tweak it. So I'm going to move back into that corner. This is where the other tool comes in, the white arrow. So if you click down on the white arrow, it's called the direct selection tool. I'm going to come over and I'm going to click on that eye again, and you'll notice now that unlike the other, this has got, the corner points here, the points that I put down from my path are no longer blue. These are all white. However, if you use that white tool point to click on any one point, you'll notice now that It turned blue, but the others remain white. And what that's telling me is that it's the only one that's going to move when I try to move it. So I'm going to click and drag this, and you'll see the others remain locked into place because they were not selected. So then I'm going to come up and refix the point that was off. You can do multiple points. If I hold down the Shift key and click the one that's next to it, then I can actually drag this up, and both of them will move, and the rest of them will stay anchored. So it really has simply to do with how many number of points you actually select to make this part work. Does this make sense to everyone? Is this working for everyone? No. Where did I lose you? Okay, so you're still on the black tool, so it will only select the entire path and move the whole thing. You need to go to the white one, and now just select outside of it, just so nothing's selected, and then click on that path again, and you'll notice everybody is white, so nobody will move. But if you click on one and turn it blue, you can now click and drag that guy, and he's the only one that'll move. Everybody else is frozen.
Oh, okay.
Right? And if you want to move two of them, hold down the Shift key and click on the other one. And now when you click to move that, they both move. Yeah. Is everybody else good on this part? Okay. We're going to find out in just a minute. Last final thing that I want to do is deal with the M. So let's go ahead and do the M really quickly. You can start, instead of relying on the work path itself to be where, to always come up and be the temporary one, if it makes you a little insecure, and it should, you can actually add a new blank path to work on to begin with. So again, the little menu that's all the way on the side, I'm going to click on here and just say I want a new path. It'll open up the dialog box, and I'm going to call this M and say OK. And you'll see that there's a new path, blank path that's sitting right here. And I can go ahead and do, again, hit the P key to get my pen tool and really quickly trace out the M. So if you guys can do that for me, that'd be great. And I've got a small mistake. So look up at my screen here really quickly. I've got a small mistake right at the bottom of the M part right here. I still have my pen tool selected. If you add the Command key, it gives you whatever of the arrows is selected. In my case, it's the white arrow, which allows me to select this point. Everybody else goes white, meaning they're all locked. And I can actually just retweak that one a little bit. And if I come up to the next one up here, sorry, I can click on it. It becomes blue, and I can tweak, sorry, and I can tweak him in just a little bit as well. And there you go. Again, I've got a point. I just by mistake hit outside of this and laid down a point. Do not try to figure out how to deal with that. Simply go over to your history palette and get rid of it by going back in history. I am going to bring all of these together. So my M is selected. You can see it's got all the points are selected. I am going to go up to the edit menu and cut this. I'm going to, oops, take that back. I'm going to select outside of it. Still got the pen tool selected, sorry. I'm going to select again, I can select the white arrow, but it means you've got to select all the points. Instead, I'm going to go back to the black selection and drag across. It's all selected. Command X will copy it. We'll cut it and go back up to my VIA. Command V or Control on Windows will paste it. And now I've got all of it on a single layer. My M work path is empty. I can throw it away. I can click on the VIA and rename it so that it's got everything on there, COM. VIA, COM. Okay, are we good on this part so far? So how can I use this thing? We've gone to all this trouble. So I want to load this as a selection, and I want to use it in my layers palette. How do I load this as a selection? That would be one way of doing it, but how have we loaded every fucking thing in this class as a selection before? Command click. Hover over the icon of the path, hold down your command key and click. It loads it as a selection. Go back to your layers palette. I'm going to click on the Viacom layer, the second one. I'm going to add a blank layer on top of it. So the blank layer that goes on top of it, and then I'm going to change my foreground color to something pretty like red. So I'm going to type in 255R, 0 green, 0 blue, and say OK. I've got an active selection going, and remember, to fill an active selection with your foreground color is Option Delete or Option Backspace on Windows. To do it with the background color is Command or Control Backspace or Delete. Command D to deselect. And you tell me that you can do better than that using the quick selection tool or the lasso tool or the any other fucking tool. There's simply no way. Yes? You just did what?
It got all blurry. So like, and then when I did Command D.
Zoom in. Oh. Yes. No, I know where this is. Did anybody's come up where their path was really blurry?
Yep.
Or the selection that they made was really blurry? Come over to, in your path palette, click on the drop down. It's not there. Make sure you've got your path is active. If you've done the blurry version on the layer, go ahead and throw that layer away. Hit Command D so that you don't have a selection going. And come down to, so I've got my Viacom is active. Here, let me turn off the thing that I filled. I've got Viacom, it's actually selected. I'm going to come down to the load path as a selection icon that's down at the bottom and click on that. That's actually loaded it, so that's not it. Command D to deselect. Where are you? There it is. Okay. I don't know why, again, this is something it's, some people have got this by default, others don't, because unless you've gone in here and changed this should not be happening. But nonetheless, hover over the, so it looks like a small circle of the marching ants that are at the very bottom of the path palette. Hold down your Option key and click. It should bring open a dialog box that says Make Selection. You've got a positive value in your feather radius. You need to change that to 0. And I cannot for the life of me tell you why some people have a positive value and why others don't. Jack, what was your value? 3. That's where the problem is. So change it to 0, say OK, and now again, Command D to deselect, but now if you Command click on that to load it as a selection, you will get a really sharp layer fill. Did this work for the rest of you guys?
So if it's 0, you don't have to worry about it.
Once you stick, it's sticky, and I don't know how it gets positive, but it's taking me forever to figure it out how to undo it, because they don't make it obvious. From what?
From, the outline, the light gray, I did pick some of that up.
Run that by me again.
The gray that's like outlining where we're supposed to get the, see this gray? Because I didn't do it perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Is that supposed to be there?
Turn off go into your layers palette. Turn off the eyeball for the Viacom.
Oh.
Yep. It's all right. Okay, couple last things that we need to do here. Is everybody good on this part so far? I just filled it with red. So I have a selection. Do you have a selection going? Marching ants, right? Here, I'll do the same thing. We'll do it all over again. I got marching ants going. Create a new layer, blank layer.
Oh, I did.
Right? Select, you need to make your foreground color red. So click on it to bring up the color picker. Type in 255R, 0 green, 0 blue, and you'll have a pure red. You still got the marching ants going. So again, to fill with foreground color is Option Delete. Background color is Command Delete. Did it fill it? You good? Okay. Everybody else good? Okay. Command D to deselect. So the challenge I'm going to throw out to you, again, we're really going to work on an image here, I swear to God, in just a second. The challenge with this is that I want to create a dovetail for this. So if I come over to the M and I look at the M right here, what I want to do is create some shape that fits perfectly inside the two little bumps, the two little mountain shapes that are at the bottom side of this. And so I could just start right from scratch again. I could go to my path palette. I could say I'm going to create a new path. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm just going to leave it called path number 1. I'm going to turn off the V because it makes things harder to see. So I've just got, the V's not, the color is not showing. So I've got my new path. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen. And I could try to click on this guy and start to do my path again like it was before. But what do you figure the chances are that I'm going to make that perfectly the same as the path before it? Not even remotely possible. That simply will not happen, right? Not going to happen. There's just no way. But there's times where you need these to be that exact thing. You need things to fit hand in glove. It needs to fit perfectly. Doing it this way, that will actually never, ever, ever work. So I'm going to go back in my history to get rid of all of that. I'm going to again turn off the red in my path palette. So again, what I'm going to do instead is this. I'm going to copy the M. So I've got my Viacom is selected. The whole path is selected. It's got everything on it. I'm going to grab the black arrow. I'm going to select the M. So I just sort of drug across it really quickly. It selects all the points. You don't need to go over everything completely. I'm going to copy this. Command C to copy it. I'm going to then create a new path. Leave it. I'm going to call it M. Actually, I'm not going to call it M. I'm going to call it path 1. And I'm going to paste into this, Command V to paste it in. And you can see it puts a copy of that M down into path number 1. You can see it's selected. It's got all the points on it. All these points are identical to the ones that we just had. But I need to get rid of the ones that are around the M and keep the ones that are describing the very bottom part of this. So that's what I'm actually going to do on this. So I'm going to go to my white arrow. And I'm going to select the one of the two at the very, very, very top. So I've selected just one that's up at the very top, and you can see all the other ones are white, and I'm simply going to hit the delete key or the backspace key. And it gets rid of both of those sections of path. I need to get rid now of the other 2 points that are on this other side, so you can click on one of them, it stays blue, everybody else is white, meaning the only thing that's going to change is this one. But I can add this one to it. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the second one as well up at the top, hit the delete key, and they're gone now. So the only path that I now have is the one that's along the bottom, and they are identical to the points that I had in the original M. So now I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, hover over any of these. I'm going to hover over the corner on the left-hand side. I'm going to click, it picks it up as a path, and then I'm just going to do another shape along the bottom and connect the path. And this is now a complete path. This is my dovetail, so I'll rename it dovetail. And I'm going to then load this as a selection. Command click, loads it as marching ants. I'm going to go back into my layers palette. I'm going to add another layer on top of this. And I'm going to make it green. So I'm clicking on my foreground color. Type in 0 for red, tab key, 255 for green, 0 for blue, and say OK. Green is now my foreground color, so in this top layer, I'm going to fill it with green. Again, Option Delete fills that with green, Command D to deselect. And now you turn on both layers and you can see that you have a perfect dovetail. Did this work for you guys? Okay, that part's fine. So then just go into layers. You've got a blank layer going. So again, Option Delete.
No, but it's not like.
No, you're hitting Option D.
Ooh.
Bingo.
That's
It's
so true.
okay. So I had retouching marathon last week. At times, you just need to step up and walk away from it all. Get your head around you and come back into it maybe on another day. Okay, last thing that we need to talk about here is this. So I am going to do another blank layer on top of all of this. I'm going to turn off the two eyeballs. I'm going to do one more blank layer up on the very top. And on this blank layer on the very top, I'm just going to fill it with the green that I've already got as my foreground color, but the whole layer. So if I double click the hand, you'll actually see, again, I'm on the pasteboard. So I've double clicked the hand. This is my entire image I can see, but I don't have the little stoplights. I don't have that kind of stuff. That's bugging me a little bit. So I'm going to hit the F key once to go to the black pasteboard, F key again to get back to what I consider the sort of my normal image. Again, I'm going to double click on the hand to make sure that it is the whole image. So basically, I've just got a field of green. Everybody good on that part? Okay, I'm going to go back to my path palette, and I'm going to Command click to load the entire Viacom. I'm going to go back to my layers palette right here, and I'm going to add this as a layer mask. So I'm going to click on it, and you can see it adds as a layer mask. And so the only thing that's showing on here, again, because I had a selection going, it fills the opposite part of it with black, and the white that's in the mask is actually showing it. However, this is a pixel mask. So if I hit the B key to get a brush, just check to make sure my brush is, I'm going to go ahead and make a completely hard brush, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I'm simply going to click and paint on this, and nothing happens because black is my foreground color. So I'm going to hit the X key to make white my foreground color and paint again, and you can see this is a pixel mask. I can paint on it, I can do all sorts of things on it, but it's a pixel mask, right? I can actually paint and do things with it. There is another kind of mask called a vector mask, and that is actually made up of paths. It is a path that you can actually edit. So if we go back to our path palette and select the Viacom, so again, select the one that's got the path that you want on it, come back into your layers palette, and I'm going to pull mine apart so that you can see this better. We've got the pixel layer thing right here. I'm going to add another layer mask to this. It's a second one, so click on Add Layer Mask again. And what you'll see is it puts a layer mask on here that is actually on a gray background with white on it. This is actually a copy of your path that they are now using as a mask. You will notice now that the little white brackets are around this. If you hit the B key or you try to paint on this guy, you click and paint, it's actually doing it only on the pixel mask. It's not doing it on the Viacom part. So I'm going to go back to the Viacom part. It's not selecting me again because I've got a brush selected. It's only going to actually work on the pixel layer. So if we throw the pixel layer one away and do not apply it, just hit delete, you will notice now that when I click on this guy, it will not paint anything because this is not a mask that is made up of pixels. This is a mask that's actually made up of points that you can actually edit. So I'm going to go back to my path palette. Let me redock this guy. I'm going to go back to my path palette. I am going to click up here on the top. How do I want to actually go about doing this? All right, I'm going to throw the, that's how I'm going to do it. Click on the pixel mask, the vector mask, hit the P key, or better yet, hit the black arrow and click and drag across this, and you'll actually see we've selected the points that are in this vector mask right here. So if I now go to the white arrow key, the direct selection tool, and select one of these points right here and click and drag it up, you'll notice that it changed the vector mask. It hasn't changed my path at all, but it changed the vector mask. So all the points still exist on this mask. Why is that important to us? I'll show you. Throw the vector mask away, and you can just say delete it all. So this is what happens, the problem that we run into with a lot of this kind of stuff is this. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my path in. I'm going to command click to load that as a selection. We're almost done, guys. We'll take one more break really quick. I'm going to come into my layers path again. I'm going to add this as a vector, as a regular pixel mask. This is a pixel mask. However, now I'm going to do a transform on this. If I hit Command T to transform this, I'm going to click on the link between width and height, and I'm just going to make it smaller. And you can see I've just come in and drug it down and made it smaller. You'll also notice that it made the mask smaller, and it made the pixel layer, the green, also smaller. But look what it didn't make smaller. If you go ahead and say OK to this and click on my path and click on it to make it active, you can see the path didn't do the transform with it. The path is still the original path. It's still this big original path. That's not going to work for me. So I'm going to go back in time. I'm in my history part right here. I'm going to go back to my where I deleted the vector mask. And instead, I'm going to do this. In my layers part right here, I'm going to do the same trick I did before. I'm going to command click to load the path as a selection. Go to my layers palette, and I'm going to now click to add a layer mask. I'm going to go back to my path. I'm going to select the Viacom. You have to have the path selected that you want to use as a vector mask. So Viacom is active, back into the layers palette, click on add another layer mask. This has now actually got my new path on it, or a copy of my path on it. Now I can transform this, Command T, again, click on the link between width and height, change it completely. I've just made it smaller. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Commit the transform. Look at the little vector mask that's sitting right here. The path actually changed along with everything else. So I'm going to go to my path palette, and you will see it's got a copy of the vector mask that's sitting right there with the little version of Viacom in it. You can actually, I'm going to turn everybody else off so it's not so confusing to see it. Let me turn off the Viacom as well. And just select, we can't select it because when I turn it off, I can't see it anymore. So I'm going to turn the path back on, the layer on that's got the pixel mask on it and the path mask on it. And I'm going to go back here. You'll see that there is a copy of your vector mask right here. Go ahead and drag it down to make a copy of it. So now that we can actually see it without having this layer visible. So I'm going to turn that part off, and you will see in your path palette right now, we have got a baby copy of the Viacom. You can also click on the other one. You'll see it's the bigger version. So it's simply a way of attaching your path to something so that when you scale it, it scales the path for you and you do not have to redraw it. Make sense? The other thing that matters here is that, well, I'm going to wait till you do your homework and then we'll have that conversation. Okay, it's let's call it a flat out 4 o'clock. If make it another hard 10, guys. If you could be back at 4:10, that would be great. We're actually going to work on images. Yes.
Can you come here for a second?
Sure. Can I what?
Come here for a second.
Sure.
My brush tool is not working. So I'm using the white and it's not letting me see the orange.
That's because right now you're working. You're on overlay blend mode.